today so far? When did you wake up?
I woke up at 5:30.
Me too! Yeah, we were there, bro! We was talking in the group chat.
Why?
Oh, it just happened. Yeah, God.
Alright, are we ready to start the class today?
I guess.
Alright, we're going to talk about comics. Now, there's a very interesting thing about comics history, because as you can see right here, Demon Slayer, the manga, has outsold the entire Western comics industry in 2020, which is... How did that happen, guys? I have no clue, but then I did make a lecture on it. And so we're going to be talking about how that came together today.
What are you doing? What the fuck? You cannot get into your circle, assistant.
I was telling you
The man who was speaking to you. Let me just give some background on this fucking character right here.
What the fuck?
He was once a professor at this fine university, and then he told a lie. He told us Mother 4 was coming soon. This was not factual. It was supposed to come out in 2014. So, due to lying to students, we had to separate our contract, and he had to work his way back up. So he started as one of our sweatshop slaves, and then went up to janitor, and now he's an assistant professor. And if you can successfully help me teach this lecture, you will get full professorship back.
Okay, but just for clarification, it was oddity, not Mother 4 that I got wrong on.
Wait, didn't you just lie to students?
Ooh.
Get out of here! The merit! Alright,
Oh, fuck me.
Demon Slayer! One manga outsold every single major Western comic publishing house in 2020. Why did that happen?
I don't know.
I didn't say anything.
I'm gonna end this story.
Tenure sucks!
We need to start with kind of the history of Western comics, right?
Okay.
So the first Western comics happened in the dawn of time, like 1890s, and those were kind of like print newspapers. Alright? And then people kind of got like a sense of what comics were as a medium, wanted to tell longer form stories. So comics really start cropping up in the 30s, in like New York, urban America. This is a really bad place and time to be a visual medium.
Why is that, Tyler?
I'm glad you asked, assistant.
Thank
Roland.
you. Am I doing a good job?
You are doing a good job. Okay, thank you. You're earning up points.
Okay, thank you.
Alright,
Why is that, Tyler?
Can we make like a point box for Roland?
alright. Every time Roland's a good boy, we're gonna give him a good boy point. Oh, you caught the board. There's another good boy point.
Oh my god.
oh shit. I really like interactive Roland boards apparently.
I can go get the star stickers.
Oh my god, yeah.
Alright, that's 2.
You get 2 division symbols. Which was backwards. Fuck me, I'm done.
You just dropped the thing.
Yeah, that was
Get it
my...
together, people.
Alright.
Stop dropping things.
So, this was a bad time to be a visual medium because America is a print culture. We tend to get all of our news and information by reading. That is seen as the way of getting information, kind of the thing you're going to need for the adult world. So, books with pictures were seen as very childish. And not only were they childish, this is for bad kids. This is like trashy television, violent video game entertainment.
That's right, Tyler.
You spoke 3 words.
Alright. So as a result, nobody really wanted to be writing comics. You hired a lot of young male immigrant writers.
Nice.
And so they start writing a lot of stories about superhumans who are usually very, very pro-union, left-leaning, protecting underprivileged people in urban spaces from big government. That's like a recurring theme through early superhero history. That's why that happens.
Are you going to talk about how Superman is actually about immigration?
Not yet.
Okay.
What?
Sorry.
Wait, what?
So,
Guess we'll find out.
another reason superheroes did really well is because they just look poppy, right? We had superheroes before. Sherlock Holmes is basically a superhero story. But what really defines superheroes as we know them now is loud, bright colors in an urban space. So this is where this aesthetic is set. Western comics really delves into superheroes because this is what sells.
And you know what's interesting about that is that connects to futurism, this idea that like there's a new urban environment and we need a sense of dynamism within it. I went to art school. I am still going to art school, by the way.
Yay!
Yay!
Alright.
So how many do I need to get out of the janitor job?
100.
Okay, I'm
We're
working
5.
there. I'm working there.
You're getting there. Okay, so one big aggregate called Detective Comics started buying up all of the successful superheroes and tried to really corner the comics market. Because right now this is a very small racket, right? So every hero that was getting popularity they bought. They bought the rights for Superman for $130. That was
Okay.
1938. So that's about $2,000 now. That's still fucking nothing. The check with the $138 sold at an auction for thousands. The check itself is worth more than the value on it. So portrait writers are bought out like crazy. This is why a lot of superheroes, even today, don't tend to touch on their golden age roots, because usually it's filled with controversy that does not look good for the companies. Most of the Marvel characters were stolen from Jack Kirby, though we'll get to that more here. Batman was completely stolen from a guy. He got like not a penny for the idea. So, we end the golden age with essentially DC having a monopoly on all superhero comics. Now we get into the silver age.
Whoa, you're skipping over the manga.
Okay, well fine, we'll talk about manga. So, the first manga to come out was... Well, manga is Japanese, right?
Yeah,
And it has stuff like One Piece. So in the 60s, you get One Piece, right? And that really sets the
One Piece was 80s.
demerit.
No. You know nothing about this, do you? Did you do any research on manga for this lecture?
But I don't read manga. Is it?
Okay, get out of here.
All right.
So here, we're gonna talk about manga real quick. So you gotta remember, during World War II, we were not very nice to Japan, okay?
Yeah.
So after all of whatever happened in World War II happened, we were occupying Japan. We had bases there. And so there was sort of a cultural diaspora going on, where they were receiving some of our culture. This included comic books. Now, people in Japan really got attached to the idea of making this visual medium. And so they started first by making like small newsprint comics, but they wanted to do that long form narrative too. They didn't have any artists didn't have like a printing company to go to aside from newspapers. So what they would do is make these long form comics in the form of like short newsprints, right?
So that's like in the newspaper when they put like 5 panels of a Spider-Man comic every week and you have to buy it to get the full story?
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's the format right now. But it starts to evolve when it gets big enough for them to have their own books as collections of these comics. Now we had something like this in America where we had these books of like Garfield comics or whatever. But here, instead of making one series and giving it its own book, these books contained a bunch of series from different newspaper comics, okay? So you would have all these different like franchises being put into one book, and when you bought it, you didn't just get one series, you got like 5 or 10 or whatever. And so this starts this trend of making a book that contains multiple franchises that just sort of update a lot more slowly rather than a book of like one story. And so we're going to see this a bit later when we get to like Shonen Jump and these other genres, but this is essentially where this starts. Do you want me to continue on?
No, I'll go into Silver Age.
Okay, go ahead.
So
I'll go back in the
at this
box, 'cause
point,
I'm a good boy. Because I'm a good boy, remember that.
yeah. You can get the points.
So much subby energy.
Golden Star, Jackson.
Thank you, Dad.
Alright. So, Silver Age is when things really start going downhill for Western comics. First of all, DC gets its first big competitor, Marvel. Jack Kirby and Stan Lee pretty much completely changed the industry with the Fantastic Four, X-Men, and Avengers. All of a sudden, Marvel is on par with DC.
Nice.
And something they learned from these big crossover events is that crossover events sell. So they went into crossover mania. Soon it's not just Batman and Superman hanging out. It's Batman and Superman literally live in the same universe. And now we can't separate it, which turns comics into these weird, massive universes that happen in real time. Mm-hmm. This is where things get weird, because that works for maybe 10 years, right? But then you start noticing that the characters don't age. So Batman has canonical adventures in the 60s and the 90s. And you have to remember these old adventures to get new plot threads, but they never address how the years work. So it starts getting really, really muddy. Next problem is it's really hard to get into as a casual viewer. So the first comic book I ever bought with my own money, I was 8 and it was Spider-Man #1. Spider-Man #1 was a sequel comic to an Iron Man comic. That Iron Man comic was a spin-off of an event comic. You had to read comics from 6 different heroes to understand that story. So 8-year-old me had no idea what the fuck was going on in Spider-Man 1. So essentially comics stopped attracting new people and got a large die-hard fan club of mostly young white men.
Like me!
Like us!
Young white men! Young white men!
Like us.
Alright. Yeah, comics start getting that vibe. And you see this big crossover problem happen a lot in superhero media. So the first big multimedia superhero franchise that popped up was DC Animated Universe. Do you guys know the DC Animated Batman show? Like the really famous one in the 90s, Mark Hamill's the Joker?
Maybe.
Yeah.
A little.
Yeah.
So that one exists an entire universe. The animated Superman cartoon crosses over with it all the time. Then there is 2 different animated Justice League cartoons that both take place in that continuity. Then there's Batman Beyond that takes place in the future. Then there is a spin-off of Batman Beyond that is about a robot in the future, and they time travel, so they affect the past all the time. And then there's a kind of Green Lantern spin-off series, and then there are 10 animated movies. There used to be 20, but they decided 10 of those weren't canon anymore. And you have to keep track of all of that stuff to follow what the hell is going on in some of these. So the animated universe pretty much crashed and burned when it got too complex that 8-year-olds couldn't follow anymore. Something similar happened to the Arrowverse. So there was a CW Arrow show, and then there was the Flash show, right? 2 was okay. Then, the next year, Legends of Tomorrow, a time travel show that affects other things, comes out. Then you have Supergirl. Then you have Black Lightning. Then you have a web series called Vixen. And then they start having Justice League-esque team-ups, and you have to watch every single show to get what's going on in the team-ups. So that got too complex and then collapsed. We're starting to see a pattern here.
Yes.
And it's really interesting that the MCU has managed to survive like this so long. And I think they're really starting to get risky now that the Loki TV show is setting up the next movie. Because you have to commit to watching the entire show to know what's going to happen in Doctor Strange 2.
Oh, god damn it. I don't want to watch the Loki show. I just want to watch Doctor Strange.
I will watch the Loki show for you and tell you what happens. Because I'm in deep at this point. I'm writing this comic insanity the whole way. But I got captured at a young age.
A noble sacrifice.
A noble sacrifice.
Alright,
For
we're getting a
knowledge.
little too far ahead, sure. Yeah, go back to manga.
Well, I'm still just about here. Now you can get into what was happening 60s, 70s in manga.
Alright, so essentially, we gotta talk about my boy Osamu Tezuka, right? This guy's known as the godfather of manga, okay? To give you an idea, like, during that cultural diaspora where Japan was getting a bunch of...
Japan.
where Japan was getting a bunch of our media, they also received all those Disney cartoons. Now, Tezuka really liked these cartoons, specifically how their eyes were like very big and expressive. That's where the prominent eyes in most anime come from today. Is from Tezuka. This guy made Astro Boy, probably his biggest thing he made. He also made Kimba the White Lion. You might know that if you're familiar with the Lion King controversy.
Dude, I love both of those shows. They're so cool.
Never heard of the second one. I know
You've never watched Kimba, have you?
I watched it at a friend's house because he was into Lion King ripoffs.
Well, actually, Kimba came out before the Lion King, so.
He did mention that.
Yeah. Alright, so... Okay, so Osamu Tezuka, he's making Astro Boy and stuff, and basically people are like, dude, this shit's so good. There's like long-form comics now. We're gonna put those in the same books we were putting the serialized stuff in. So now we're getting into like shonen genres and stuff. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, shonen is specifically a comic focused on young kids or young boys from like 10 to 16, 18 or whatever like that. Yeah.
Is it seinen for young girls?
No. Shoujo's for young girls.
Shoujo's young girls.
Seinen is for older boys from like 18 to 30 or something like that. And so that's when we get into like JoJolian and stuff like that.
Yes, we do.
So there are different demographics.
Yeah, the genres are divided by demographic, not what the actual comic contains. So like Death Note and My Hero are both shonen comics, despite the fact that they have very different sort of media or
vibes.
I would not peg Death Note as shonen.
Death Note's Shonen.
But I understand
it was
that
published
it
in
is.
Shonen Jump. which we're about to
Everyone
get
who
to.
watched Death Note watched it before they were 15.
Yeah.
Yeah. I watched it when I was like 14.
So yeah, let's get into Shonen Jump real quick because this is this is probably like the big sort of monopoly on the shonen or just the manga genre in general. They have Dragon Ball, they have Naruto, One Piece. Name a manga, they probably have it.
Name a manga.
They used to have JoJo, they don't anymore.
No, now isn't it Ultra Jump?
Mikayla,
Yeah,
what manga do you
Ultra Jump.
know? What anime do you know? It's probably them.
Oh my god. Black Butler.
They don't actually
They
know
don't
Black
have
Butler.
Black Butler.
I know
This-
one anime.
I understand the point you're trying to make.
Yeah, but
It's
they
not
have,
me.
they have a bunch. They have like My Hero. They have
Fist of the North
The
they
anime
have
nerds
Fist
out
of
there
the
will
Star.
care.
They have Jujutsu Kaisen, Chainsaw Man, all that shit. They own all of them, and I mean, at this point, like. Once Shonen Jump becomes this big, they decide to do their own crossovers. Now they didn't fuck it up like DC did.
Yeah.
They decide to do it with some class. So you'll have like manga specials where like Luffy meets Goku and they fight for one chapter, and it's pretty cool, and they never meet again. And then they do like a DS game where you have like Luffy and Naruto and all your favorite shonen characters fighting off against each other, and then none of that is canon.
Yeah.
Most recently, they did a game called Jump Force, which I mean, it's really cool. No one likes playing it, but
Yeah.
I mean, you have like Deku, and he's fighting off against what the frick was his name? Well, it was Piccolo, right?
Yeah.
And then like Deku apparently is racist because he thinks Piccolo is a villain because he is green.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like a big crossover event that you don't have to watch to get what's going on in the comics. If you don't feel like buying the fighting game, you can just go to Comic 7 to Comic 8.
It's just you get a big fucking hard on from watching all these different fucking like franchises fight each
So
other.
for the fanboys who want to see big crossovers, they have it. But for the casual readers, they can also just casually read. It works for everybody.
And what makes this even stronger is that because you don't have to read all the comics, they get Jump Force. You can play Jump Force and be like, oh fuck, this Naruto guy is kind of cool. I wonder what's going on in his comics.
Yeah.
Oh dude, fucking Deku's kind of cool. This JoJo guy, I kind of want to learn more about him. So you could learn more about these characters by playing the game, and that would get you interested in the comics. So they sort of had this cyclical returning thing where you would read the comics, then get interested in more comics, and then read those. Very cool. And then Dragon Ball came out.
Yeah, go into Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball is Story of the West, or Journey to the West, but as a manga.
Yeah, and way cooler probably.
But then they did like Dragon Ball Z, and it became like an action shonen. It used to be a comedy, now it's like very focused on action. That's what people know it as now.
Yeah.
Like people shooting giant lasers at each other.
It became
And
a lot more serious.
And this sort of started the idea of like the action genre in manga. So after Dragon Ball, we started getting Naruto, which was pretty cool. We started getting One Piece, and then these were known as the big three. We got Bleach as well, but that's no longer as big as it used to be. A lot of other franchises that sort of borrowed this model of a bunch of characters fighting each other, and then evolved from that to the point where now we're at like JoJo and My Hero, where they're like thinking about the abilities they're using and trying to use them in clever ways to defeat each other.
And another big thing about Dragon Ball is that's when they start using the anime to sell the manga, right?
Right, yeah. So Dragon Ball comes out, then they make an animated version of it, and you don't have to read the manga at all to understand the anime, and the anime just is an adaptation of the manga. So if you watch all of the anime and want to know what happens next, you can just carry right back onto the manga and understand what's going on.
Yep.
And they run the anime at a loss. They lose money on it. The whole point is they intentionally release the anime slower than the manga, so you'll be left on the cliffhanger and want to keep reading, and so you're forced to start buying the books.
Yep.
And sometimes they'll intentionally never end the story in the anime, so you have to go to the books.
Yep.
Which is a really smart marketing tactic.
Yep.
Yep.
And it works.
And it works, unlike my boy here talking about Western comics. What's going on there? Don't seem to be doing too hot.
Yeah, the Bronze Age happens. They get really into martial arts all of a sudden. Every new superhero has to be like a racist Bruce Lee clone. That's where we get Iron Fist from. Also, the crossovers get fucking insane here. This is when we get our first kind of lead up to Infinity War and Secret War, which means stuff to some people. But nothing important happens here. 1986, the comic industry in the West gets fucked forever. Watchmen comes out.
No!
I
Watchmen.
said watermelon.
I'm sorry, it says Watchmen.
Man.
Yeah.
Watchmen.
Watchmen.
Watermelon would have been a more helpful comic for the industry, I bet. Watchmen is a super gritty and dark superhero story. One of the main characters is a fucking radical conservative who like burns people alive.
Nice.
I love him. Yeah.
Yeah!
Roar shark. Roar shark. Roar shark. Roar shark. Roar shark.
In like the new adaptation, they comment on like his followers are white supremacists. It's like weird tension and it's very intentional. But the comic is ultra mega like grim dark, which really appealed to the fan base that was starting to grow up at this point. All of a sudden, comics weren't for kids anymore. Look, Mom, this is serious big boy media, and there's violence and it's cool. And they really start honing in on that like angry late teens, early 20s.
Yep.
Jesus.
So even though Watchmen in its own right was actually a really good comic about why violence is never the answer, the comic industry got the complete wrong message for it. Next, The Dark Knight Returns came out when conservative angry Batman who's old starts beating kids. Drugs and violence aren't cool. And that one's super dark. He like snaps a Joker's neck because he's ultra dark. And then it just devolves into every character kills everyone. They're the darkest version of themselves, covered in blood, rippling muscles, screaming, angst. Batman suffering in camp blood. Yes.
When does the Killing Joke come in?
About the same time.
Okay.
The Killing Joke is a book where the Joker rapes Barbara Gordon.
Jesus.
Take pictures of it and shows it to Barbara Gordon's dad, Commissioner Gordon, to drive him insane. To prove that everyone is just like the Joker deep inside. That's where that whole Joker Batman story you keep seeing retold originally came from.
Wait, I might be a little confused. This is the one where like he beats up Robin with a crowbar, right?
No, that's Death in the Family.
Okay, no,
That comes up
I get my stuff confused.
Around this point, they give Batman a family for the sole sake of killing all of them horribly one by one. And then every major Batman arc at this point is just Batman's sad because another person dies, and another person dies. And then there's this big event comic where the Justice League, for some reason, cover up that one of the villains raped one of the heroes, and Batman's like, I'm not for it, and they erase his memory. They start using rape for shock value, rape and suicide all of the time. So
Cara might have a comment about that.
It's just going downhill fast.
Oh.
At the same time, 2008, Iron Man comes out. All of a sudden, superhero movies are cool. Because we finally have the CGI and special effects level to really adapt this like pages onto screen. It looks good. And superhero quickly after this becomes the big blockbuster genre. Endgame has made more money than any other film ever released.
Correct. Fact check.
So, the comic industry really tries to take advantage of this, right? But people watch the movies, and the movies and comics have literally nothing to do with each other. So you'll watch this cool X-Men movie, and Wolverine's played by Hugh Jackman, and you're like, oh cool, I want to read the comics. And then Wolverine is just like murdering his son. And you're like, where the fuck did this come from?
Swag.
Also, it's dark version of the character you have no connection to. The lore is so complicated you have no idea what's going on. And so people essentially just zone out. They're not getting new readers. Their old readers are either getting way too into it and they're angry fanboys who yell at them for every major decision they make, or they finally kind of grow up and realize they don't want to see Batman's villains rape people anymore. And so this is the kind of shitty situation that we're in. Any questions?
Not terribly.
Oh,
Was the Iron Man movie the one we watched and you didn't like it?
We watched Iron Man 3. I didn't like it. I liked Iron Man 2. Iron Man 1 is meh.
Okay.
Iron Man 1 is like beat for beat the most generic superhero movie ever with a slightly fun character, but it was one of the first ones to do it well, and so it blew up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do we do now?
So yeah, is Western... now you can kind of see how Ethan Comics is
Good
doing...
point. Give Roland a good point.
Roland, I think you deserve quite
I
a few.
agree.
Yo! I'm 1/3 of the way there, baby! 1/4
Wait, what the fuck?
Yo!
Alright, you've been making progress.
Halfway there! Oh!
There's one more point on the board.
Roland, my tenor boy.
Alright.
One last unaddressed
So, as you
thing.
can see, the Eastern Comics industry is doing a lot of tricks to broaden their base, getting a lot of sales, and the Western Comics industry is just going down the toilet. So what should we do?
Actually.
There are 4 kind of big solutions floating around right now. The first is kind of like the Linkara answer, and it's just to embrace what comics are. So comics are these crazy, large, expanded universes. Every DC comic ever published has been rewritten to fit into this large canon. Sometimes they have comics take place in alternate universes so they don't contradict each other. Sometimes the entire multiverse gets reset and we start over again because we had too many multiverse adventures. And if you pay attention, literally every comic connects in some weird, convoluted way. So, why don't you just embrace it? Let time actually pass. Let us watch these heroes age and have kids in real time. That way everyone pays attention, every writer feeds off every story. That's kind of what Linkara wants, what a lot of comic fans want. The problem with that is, that means you have to pay even closer attention, and it's even harder to break in. So that's kind of a shitty idea. The next thing is to just drop the fucking continuity thing.
Yeah!
It's cool, but like it's impossible to read. Just fucking please
Why don't
stop.
we ever fucking incorporate continuity into these? This is fucking terrible.
Yeah, these are stories about people shooting robots with a bow and arrow. We don't need strict continuity.
Yeah, fuck it.
So there are a few times they tried wiping continuity, right? The first was All-Star. So DC hired like famous writers associated with characters to tell the story they always wanted to tell without being limited to continuity. And we get All-Star Superman, and it is incredible. Superman like sits on a ledge and talks a girl out of suicide and tells her that she matters, and it's this beautiful like comic long issue. The premise of the story is that Superman gets shot by like a evil beam, and now he's gonna die in a year, and so he's trying to cross everything off of his bucket list and prepare the world for life without Superman.
Which is a really good idea.
Yeah.
That's such a good comic.
The next thing that comes out is All-Star Batman. That's written by Frank Miller. Frank Miller got super sexist, racist, and insane as he got older.
Which is really fitting for a comics artist, right?
Yeah, right? Yeah!
Stereotypical
So-
wife beater, right?
Yeah.
All-Star Batman includes a line where Batman beats Robin and says, "I can do whatever the fuck I want, I'm the goddamn Batman." Wonder Woman makes an appearance, and she beats up random men on the street and calls them worthless sperm banks.
Girl boss. That's the second time.
my
That's the
demographic.
second.
Every female character is almost completely naked. It's like horrible.
Yeah.
It does so poorly, everyone gets so upset that they cancel it and never try to break away from the continuity again. That's the lesson they got out of that. Marvel tried something similar, and their failure wasn't quite as spectacular. They just released something called Ultimate Spider-Man. The same concept with Marvel, and it just fell flat. It was kind of boring. And so Marvel's like, fuck, our sales dropped by like 2%. Fuck, cancel the whole thing. Back to the continuity. Green Goblin, take over the Earth.
Wait, that was a comic, right?
Yeah.
We're doing. So can you talk about how that happens?
Yes. Okay. So something Marvel did for a while was that every year they would have a big event, and every comic had to lead into it. But they didn't always tell the writers what the big event of the year was going to be, because they didn't want people to like leak it, right? So you'd be writing your story, and all of a sudden Marvel would come in and say, okay, cut off your story, that doesn't matter anymore. Midway through, we need you to lead up to Green Goblin takes over the planet. So if you're telling like a White House drama story, right, all of a sudden your entire story gets cut in the middle. And oftentimes if a comic drops sales, they'll switch writers, and the writers will completely start over with a new story. So there are hundreds of loose plot threads just hanging everywhere. And then every once in a while a writer will try to be smart and go back to one of the old convoluted loose plot threads from 20 years ago, and you just have to read up to figure out what the hell is going on. So it's a horrible system. But anyways, yeah, drop the continuity. That's one solution. Third solution is to just hope and pray for an indie revolution. DC and Marvel are too far gone. There's no hope for them. So, in 1992, Image Comics came out, and it was this big indie comic aggregate, and it came out of the window like strong. They had a few superhero lines, but they were also selling Western comics, like comedy comics, all sorts of new genres. It was exciting. And this is where Walking Dead comes from. by the way.
Yeah. I was about to say.
Yes.
You know what my favorite indie comic is? Hitball.
Yo! Hitball! Hitball! Image Comics, if you want to save yourself, put Hitball on your site. Hitball! 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 But anyways, so Image Comics started off really strong, and then essentially they didn't have the corporate backing to keep up steam. So occasionally they'll have long lag periods between publishes, and the quality wildly varies. And they essentially just became an unreliable comic, and they just kind of fell back into obscurity, and now they're just a small indie publishing title. So this indie comics revolution is very unlikely because indie is not usually organized, and to succeed in print media, you really do need to be organized. There's a few webcomics that really broke off. Homestuck is the obvious big example, but those are the exception, not the rule.
Yeah.
The fourth,
You have like Lore Olympus, and that's like the biggest comic on the biggest webcomic site, and nobody likes it.
pretty much.
Seriously?
I mean,
I feel like you might be slightly incorrect about that.
I sat through a whole lecture about why it's stupid and dumb, so I might be biased.
Just because you see something on YouTube doesn't mean it.
No, that was actually in my class. I had a class where one of the students did a presentation.
You go to Micah. You don't go to a great school like Towson, which has great academic standards.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, continue.
I honestly have respect for anybody who does something like that, you know? So sucks or not.
I mean, webcomics are always going to be a small indie thing. That's just the reality of it. So the fourth big solution is that Marvel and DC need to get out of superhero comics while they still can.
Yeah.
Can I say this?
Yeah.
Fuck cape. Fuck cape. Fuck cape.
What is cape?
Cape shit.
Cape,
like superheroes. Cape shit. Fuck cape shit. Get it out of here.
Yeah.
So, once superhero movies fall out of fashion and give it like 30, 40 years, because they will, comics are going to be in a really bad point, because now nobody is going to be really interested in seeing what's going on in the source material. They're not picking up a new, younger audience, so they're probably going to stagnate, and a lot of our main titles are just going to disappear. We're probably always going to have a Batman, always have a Superman, always have a Spider-Man. Those are just two popular IPs. But a lot of like the smaller heroes, like Ant-Man, are probably going to be gone in like 6 years. We're not going to hear from them. So what Marvel and DC could do is just start releasing small titles under different genres, kind of building up new fan bases, trying to get kind of that manga audience, and then not have to rely solely on these convoluted superhero extended universes. Comics probably aren't going to go with any of these four solutions. They're all big risks, and they kind of could upset their current market. So Western comics is probably going to continue to decline, and single series of manga is going to sell them out.
Manga is cool, am I right?
Yeah.
How about I talk about that for a bit? So we need to talk about a problem that manga has right now as well, because it's not all sunshine and rainbows over there. There's a man named Yoshihiro Togashi, right? Do you know about this guy?
No, never.
All right, so this is the guy who made Yu Yu Hakusho. He made Hunter x Hunter.
Yep.
So, like on an issue of Yu Yu Hakusho, one of his readers asked him. It was like a ask the author kind of thing. One of his readers asked him, "Hey, what's the kind of schedule you work with?" And so he decided to make a whole ass equation to explain to his audience how much effort goes into a chapter of manga every week. And remember, he makes these comics weekly.
Yeah.
He does a 20-page chapter a week. Can I clap for her? So. I'm almost there. Okay.
Let's go Roland.
So, how this equation works is you take your deadline, which is usually in 5 days because weekends are spent storyboarding, right? You take your deadline, you take the amount of pages you need to get done, you then divide the amount of pages you need to get done by the deadline. So if he has 5 days to get 20 pages done, that means he needs to get 4 pages done a day. If he's working on these pages for 5 hours, if it takes 5 hours to finish 1 page, that means that he needs to spend 20 hours. I believe the actual math worked out to 19, I forgot how, but he needs to work on these for 19 hours to finish a single chapter, or finish everything he needs to get done in a day. He hits 4 hours of sleep, he has to schedule his poops. It is ridiculous.
And then on the weekends, he's just spending the whole time writing and storyboarding. So there was literally no breaks.
There was no breaks. Eventually, he was working so hard that he injured his right arm while working on the Chimera Ant arc in Hunter x Hunter. And so he started writing that arc with a broken arm. Not a broken arm, but an injured arm. And so because he couldn't put as much effort into it, he was doing these strange little doodles and putting swaths of ink around so you could get get the general gist of what's happening in that chapter, and then eventually he
So is it just him, or why doesn't he have other people?
It's just
helping
him.
The way manga tends to work is it's one solo artist who draws, writes everything. That's how you get.
Why can't you have other people help him?
Because he's hired as the one man to work on the series. He's in charge of the narrative and everything.
Yeah.
It's more auteur based. So that's why you have these really convoluted, love put into expanding anime worlds. It's because it's one person's imagination gone wild.
Yeah.
It's not watered down like DC Comics are, where there's a corporate board telling you can't get too imaginative here, we need to have a sell point.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of risky things, and if something doesn't pay off, they'll just, okay, that auteur didn't work, we'll move on to the next one.
And now, for clarification, if your manga does get big enough, sometimes you do get a team that will help you work on each chapter, but that rarely ever happens, and that never happened for Togashi.
Yeah.
Togashi. So he worked on Hunter x Hunter, injured his arm, continued working on Hunter x Hunter. His arm is now broken. He cannot work on this manga anymore. We are left on a cliffhanger in the Dark Continent arc, and there's no resolution waiting for us. We haven't gotten a new chapter in years, and we're stuck on this amazing arc where it turns out the whole place we've been exploring throughout this the entire planet we've been exploring throughout this series is just an island on a lake surrounded by a giant continent that no one has seen yet. It is amazing. We will never see what happens next.
Which is a good thing, because we don't want to work this person to death.
We don't want to work this person to death.
I was about to say, like, was that sort of on the account of, like, artistic burnout? Like, he...
No, it wasn't artistic burnout. He literally, broke his arm.
Oh, it, like, never healed? It's been years, though.
I forgot exactly what happened, but basically he can't draw the same way he used to.
Jesus.
And there's also a psychological toll to that. Like, revisiting that artwork must be horrifying.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
This is obviously not all manga artists have broken their arms, but they all experienced a similar burnout. The guy who made Naruto had almost the exact same schedule that Togashi did. I believe the person who made Jujutsu Kaisen took a 1-month break because of how hard he was working on that. So these artists work incredibly hard on these comics, and they get almost no days off. The work culture there is horrible, and that needs to be fixed.
Basically, both comics industries are fucked, but the Eastern one makes money, so that's going to succeed. And these workers' rights are probably not going to be fixed anytime soon because no one's motivated to fix them.
Except for me. And maybe you. I don't know about you. We are going to band together, start a new culture, a new comic aggregate thing. Hitmoll's going to be the biggest comic in the universe. We're going to save the world, the whole comics industry.
All right,
We're
you know
do
what?
it.
I dig your heart. I'm going to give you the last 10 points you need. You're a professor again.
Yo! Thank
You
you
have
so
tenure.
much.
Congratulations.
Well, I had tenure before. That's why I had to do this. And take all that. All right, listen, everyone. Thank you for making me a lecturer again. Play Omori, everyone.
Fire!
Right?
No!
So a few weeks after recording, my girlfriend made a really good point, and that's that an indie comics revolution has already kind of started. I mean, new content's being posted to webtoons every day, but more interestingly is this whole phenomenon of the Instagram comic. If you haven't seen these, oftentimes they're like short 4-panel things you'll see while scrolling, and their monetization model is very different. So they make money off having a large amount of followers and ad revenue, and they also sell some merch on the store. And I think the reason Roland and I didn't pick them up on their radar is because they're acting on such a small scale. So kind of the innovation in comics is really happening by small people making niche media to appeal for maybe 10,000, 2,000 viewers. And that could really be the way comics are heading now that people are kind of getting tired of watered down Western industry. I don't know. The future of comics might not be as bleak as Roland and I first pitched it. Also, my girlfriend gave me a list of Instagram comics to shout out. Hannah Hiddlem, Amanda D, Safely Endangered, Background Noise Comic, The Reddit, Deliberately Buried, and Litterbox Comics. Oh, and Hey Bob Guy. And I'll link to some of those in the description. But yeah, Indie Comics Revolution, it's happening, and it's not the way I expected.